The issue of corporal punishment has become a hot topic, a big issue of debate these days, and it has been triggered by the incident in Shaba Higher Secondary School, where a teacher on the 15th of July took a rubber pipe and assaulted several class 10 children for not getting the minimum benchmarks he had set of 55 marks for economics. And then on July 26, based on the complaint of two parents, he was charged by the police for battery and his case was forwarded to the Paro Dzongkha court. When the news first came out around 2 weeks ago, there was a lot of outrage from people online, including teachers and even some parents, that the teacher was not being given justice or that this was going too far. And there are many who came out in support of corporal punishment. But this week, when the Bhutanese got more details and published the pictures of the damage done to the children, the opinion is once again shifting to people saying that they don't support corporal punishment or that they support corporal punishment but not this badly. So I think here it is important to first of all from this lesson know that when you allow corporal punishment, there are no limits. The World Health Organization itself has said that there is a greater and inherent risk of escalation when you even allow so-called mild corporal punishment. And this takes us to the wider and bigger debate of corporal punishment in Bhutan. This issue is settled scientifically speaking. The World Health Organization, the UNICEF, international research bodies, scientists, educationists, medical experts, doctors, you name it, and peer-reviewed journals, a lot of documentation and research on this have all proven that corporal punishment does not work. In fact, in short, it causes significant psychological and also physical damage to the child, and it helps in no parameter of learning and discipline. So the UNICEF says that it not only affects the physical and mental well-being but also violates the rights of a child. It leads to negative academic outcomes, disengagement from the lessons or classroom, a fear of going to school or class, and also higher dropout rates, increased aggression, and therefore the UNICEF recommends, like the Education Ministry, positive disciplining, restorative practice, socio-emotional learning and teacher training. The World Health Organization highlights that physical punishment or corporal punishment carries no positive outcome. It triggers harmful physiological stress responses like affecting the brain structure and the nervous and the cardiovascular systems, and damages long-term cognitive and socio-emotional development. The WHO's current evidence review says corporal punishment is associated with poorer mental and physical health, increased behavioral problems, impaired cognitive and social emotional development, poorer educational outcomes, increased aggression again as UNICEF pointed out, and greater perpetration and acceptance of violence. This is why the Ministry of Education and Skills Development since 1997 maintains zero tolerance policy towards corporal punishment, favoring dialogue, understanding and positive discipline. The ministry has come out with several directives over the years saying that corporal punishment not allowed, and is again revising its school discipline guidelines to emphasize that student well-being and accountability is there. The Bhutan Penal Code doesn't allow corporal punishment because it is straight up assault or battery, as in the Shaba case. The Child Protection Act of 2011 from sections 212 sections 212 to sections 214 criminalizes assault, cruelty, battery against children and prohibits harsh or degrading punishment for children in homes, schools and institutions. Now, apart from this, when you look at a school environment, there are two categories of children who get the maximum corporal punishment. The first are the so-called difficult or disruptive children, and the second category are the weak children. are the ones who are weak in academically. In the first case of the disruptive children, we have to know that these children who exhibit such behavior come from broken homes, households marked by family conflict, separation, domestic violence, and because these conditions are there, they disrupt the children's emotional and neurological development. And rather than simply being naughty, the children are frequently demonstrating survival mechanisms, trauma response, and a lack of healthy behavioral models. So when you already have a child suffering from violence, the last thing you want to do is bring more violence on the child, which is what corporal punishment is. The other aspect is that the issue of hidden disabilities among children. If I can share an example, around more than a year ago, the Bhutanese, we were doing stories on disability among children, and we came across the Chichaling Higher Secondary School, which until recently was not an inclusive school. It has classes from 4 to 12, and then because it was part of the Bhutan Baccalaureate kind of project or trial project kind of group of schools, it did a rapid assessment of its students, not even a proper survey, a rapid assessment of its weaker students, and it found 58 cases of hidden disabilities among students which were diagnosed by the JDW-NRH. And these 58 were cases of intellectual disability, learning disability, and specific learning disability, which is to do with weaknesses in certain subjects like math or English, Dzongkha, so on and so forth. Now the school realized that the best way to deal with these children is to provide them support, additional classes, but in the absence of the knowledge, in a school environment that allows corporal punishment, these group of children will be getting a lot of corporal punishment, because students assume that, the teachers assume that the students are lazy or not working hard enough. The National Health Survey has found that we have 48,325 persons with disabilities in Bhutan. This is 6.8% of the total population. This is the known disabilities. The actual numbers will be much bigger if you look at it, because there are many hidden disabilities, so people not aware that they have disabilities. Then if you look at the global data, 1 in 36 children are in the autism spectrum, also known as ASD, which means we have 5,000 to 5,300 children in Bhutan with autism. And this often leads to learning disability, leads to difficulty in learning, difficulty in behavior in certain cases. And because many of these are not diagnosed, again they are met with corporal punishment instead of treatment and understanding, and instead of kind of accommodation and inclusivity. Then the global data shows that the neurological condition known as ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, this is a common brain-based neurological developmental condition that affects how a person pays attention, sits, and controls sudden urges. Around 5 to 8% of children globally have this ADHD condition. But again, in Bhutan, many children are not diagnosed. So again, they are treated as either being disruptive or being academically weak. And again, this group of children are met with a higher proportion of corporal punishment. So there is no disability in the world which can be treated with beating. And I think it is time we evaluate what corporal punishment is doing to our children. Then there is also the other category of vulnerable children. Children who may not necessarily have disabilities or come from difficult backgrounds, but vulnerable children who are vulnerable because of their age, because of circumstances in life, because of the hormones in their brains, because of certain things that they go through. And when you introduce corporal punishment to this group of children because they are not getting the certain marks that you want or are not behaving as per a certain code, you can push them over the edge. The recent example we can give is in the case of a monastery in Sarbang, where a young monk was beaten severely, just like in the Shaba case, and he died by suicide not long after that, and his mother blames that beating as triggering him to commit or to die by suicide. So I think here it's clear that we have different groups of vulnerable children, and when children are naughty or disruptive, there are various reasons behind it which we need to look into. Then I think another difficult and sensitive topic is the issue of sexual harassment and sexual abuse. UNICEF and NCWC survey found that around 12.8% of children, which is 1 in every 8 child, has experienced both physical and sexual harassment and abuse. This is very concerning. And there is a lot of research which shows that an institution and an environment which allows for corporal punishment and violence also creates the conditions for sexual harassment and sexual abuse. Because when in corporal punishment, you are basically touching a child's body without consent. So physical violence normalizes touching the child's body without consent, and this breaks down normal physical boundaries, and this can lead to sexual abuse and sexual harassment. And also the issue of coercion and power. When teachers or staff use physical force to establish unequal power dynamics, their use of threat or physical punishment to silence, threaten or coerce students can be used to coerce them into sexual acts. There is also the issue of research showing that institutional settings that allow for physical violence or overlook physical violence and fail to protect children from physical violence and corporal punishment also is the same setting that allows sexual abuse, sexualized bullying and other kinds of harms. Also, in the same setting, children who are conditioned to submit to adult authority and physical discipline may find it harder to recognize, resist or report abusive sexual behavior. So this is very clear. There is a correlation between corporal punishment and sexual abuse and harassment. And there are anecdotal cases where school children in the past, in the guise of corporal punishment, have undergone sexual harassment and abuse in Bhutan. Then there is the issue while dealing with the whole of this case, a very defensive mindset of school managements across the board. In the Shaba Higher Secondary School case, the school management has stood strongly behind the teacher despite what he has done. And initially, when the case came out, and even now, first of all, what has been done is in terms of when you talk to two of the victims, one was hit 22 times and one was hit 19 times, and published their pictures with consent, we could see the damage done. But at the same time, behind that, there was a lot of physical and emotional scarring. In terms of student number 1, the one who hit 22 times, she experienced pain for up to a week even using the bathroom, and could not even move on her sides at night, and had high fever and required medical help. The second student had 3 days she couldn't sleep and eat properly, and both of them are undergoing depression right now, and they had to be physically moved out of the location and transferred to another school because they were so traumatized with that. In a setting like this, and they are not the only two victims, because the teacher, I believe, assaulted other kids as well. In a setting like this, you would expect the school management to be more sympathetic with the students and maybe take a more critical view of its teacher, but no. The school management, in statements to the Bhutanese, to Chencho Dema, who has done the story, is that it's a good teacher, he's a good teacher, that the children's skin is very delicate, so marks can form easily, and the school management was overall very defensive and declined to share the numbers of other parents, which would have helped us to expose the level of abuse, and also the number of the teacher who we wanted to call and ask why he had done this. So this is not only in Shaba Higher Secondary School. Generally, there is a very defensive mindset from school managements when it comes to corporal punishment or physical abuse by its teachers. A defensive mindset which doesn't place child rights and child welfare at the center of the issue, but rather looks at the image of the school or of managing these school teachers. So I think this is very regrettable, I must say. And then from the comments coming online, you can see initially, especially initially, there is a culture of violence in Bhutan. And a lot of comments were saying that regretting that corporal punishment is not like there before and all of that, you know. But they need not worry, because again, a survey by UNICEF and NCWC recently shows that 64.1% of Bhutanese children have been subject to physical violence, primarily through corporal punishment at homes and in schools. And 50% of Bhutanese children have been subject to emotional violence, which takes the form of humiliation, shaming, or intimidation. So the data already proves that this is something which is very common in Bhutan. And we have this culture of violence, this culture of accepting corporal punishment as being something normal. But if you take a deeper look, there is something quite disturbing at play as well. Many of the people came online to say, it happened to me, but I turned out fine. Or that because of lack of corporal punishment, children are not disciplined these days. But if you look at, again, the scientific studies, the studies by psychologists, there is a terminology for this. Psychologists say this term, that it happened to me, but I turned out fine, is a common psychological coping mechanism. Or it's called a survivor mindset, or generalization, or generational normalization. Because when people look at the corporal punishment, they often defend the practice, because acknowledging the harm can be deeply uncomfortable. It is a kind of psychological self-preservation, because if you are honest with yourself really and acknowledge that your parents or teachers harmed you, it requires accepting that adults you deeply loved or trusted have done something with you which is deeply wrong. So your brain tries to protect you and says it is okay, it was fine. There is also a survival bias, because people who say I am fine are only looking at their own survival. They are not looking at the hidden or otherwise known impacts of violence on other children or the trauma being suffered by them. There is also the conflating of outcomes. Some may say that they credit their success or their manners or career to corporal punishment, but actually that is because of their own resilience, because of some good teachers and other positive aspects of their upbringing that caused the success. This also happens when a society or community widely practices corporal punishment, and therefore trauma is normalized, is taken as something normal, though it is not. So the hidden impacts of saying I am fine or I went through it but I turned out well, there are hidden impacts and damages. The first is acceptance of violence, because these children who's been exposed to corporal punishment and violence are statistically more likely to think of violence as a tool, approve of violence as a tool to solve conflicts in adult relationships and to even hit their own children. It also leads to emotional suppression, because when turning out fine often means learning to suppress your fear, your anger, your anxiety, which can manifest later in chronic stress, depression, and difficulty forming secure emotional bonds. It can also lead to authority dynamics, especially in a hierarchical society. It can create a subconscious belief that might is right. It can either lead to a very submissive behavior to authority or an aggressive need for control over others. And then there is also the fact that when, especially teenage children, at an age when there's a lot of hormones in the body and they can't regulate themselves emotionally, when they are subject to a lot of violence, it can lead to return violence. Now, what are we looking for in our youth? What do we want them to become? We're all talking about the 21st century economy, about readying our youth for a future economy, and that is why we're giving so much importance to STEM and critical thinking, critical analysis. But if you allow corporal punishment, you are going to create a youth who is dumber, who is more violent, who is either submissive or wants to exert control over others, a toxic personality, who is entirely unready, not ready for the 21st century economy. Because for the economy where AI, where soft skills, where technical skills, the jobs of the future, all of these require qualities which will be destroyed by corporal punishment. You want our youths to be smarter, to be able to be creative, to be critical thinking, and to have self-respect, to be able to control the emotions. Corporal punishment destroys all of that. All of these require qualities which will be destroyed by corporal punishment. Now, if we can also look at the issue of what can be done as a solution. And over here, I think we have to first of all know the extent of the problem. So already the Ministry of Education has a tool called the Bhutan Situational Analysis Survey. It's called SAS, which monitors student well-being and safety issues. But these set of questions does not have any questions on corporal punishment. So I think it's time that the survey start asking questions on if students are subject to corporal punishment. So to know the extent of the problem, and it's already not allowed, and I think the ministry can take it further from there. And then teachers will have to be trained better, and then there needs to be more tools provided to teachers, because at the end of the day, nobody is saying that they should not be disciplined, they should not be controlled, and that the teacher should not be empowered. Definitely they should be, In fact, let me put it on the record and say that I personally believe that teaching is the most noble profession of all, hands down, and I have a lot of respect for teachers. So this is not for all teachers, but this is to highlight a situation, a reality of our society. And I think teachers are also extremely overworked. They have to put in their heart and soul, and a teacher is never off duty, because even at home they have to plan lessons and they're always thinking about children. And we know of teachers who've gone beyond their role of teachers and become like parents to children in difficult situations. So this is not for all teachers, but I'm highlighting a reality of our society, a reality of our education system. And the most important thing here is if we can break the cycle of violence with this generation. And that is the question before us, and what we do about it will define our future generations to come. Thank you.